Welcome, friends. Welcome to Global Focus, where we dive deep into the most pressing issues shaping our world today. I'm your host here. Hari Prakash Sinha. Today, we tackle a topic that is not just economic but deeply geopolitical: how the US China trade war impacts India's geo-economics and international relations. This trade war has been a game changer, and India finds itself at critical juncture, balancing its economic aspirations with evolving global dynamics. To help us decode this complex subject, we are joined by Dr. Adityanjee, an expert in international trade and geopolitics. He is the president of Council for Strategic Affairs. Dr. Adityanjee, it's an honor to have you here with us. Let's explore how these shifting sands impact India's global standing.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me yet once again on Global Focus, your platform. I'll be happy to talk to you about international relations and geopolitics. Just a disclaimer, I'm not an economist and I'm not an expert on international trade, but
Yeah.
I'll try to do my best.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, moving to my first question, how has the US China trade war created economic opportunities for India? And what are the major barriers preventing India from fully capitalizing on them? So, what do you say about it?
So, when we talk about US-China trade war, it is a kind of misnomer. It's a US-China trade conflict, not a trade war. It's not a full-scale trade war. And it did not begin just yesterday or today. This has been going on since 2017, specifically from the first term of Mr. Clinton, when he became the president of US. At that time, he, imposed some tariffs on certain Chinese items. And what China did was to retaliate. They made a counter list and put tariffs on US, mainly agricultural products. So this has been ongoing since 2017. Some of those tariffs and restrictions that were imposed on China by Mr. Trump were continued actually by the next president, Joseph Biden. He did not withdraw those, tariffs or sort of duties on Chinese products. So this is a slow motion economic conflict that has been going on. And around the same time, we started hearing terms like decoupling US-China economy. And then in March of 2023, there was a term introduced by EU, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, de-risking instead of decoupling, suggesting that it's not just 100% break from Chinese economy, either for US, UK, or European Union. It is, managing the separation so that there's no risk to these Western economies. Around the same time, new terms have been bandied about de-dollarization. We have to keep in mind that none of these processes are instantaneous. None of these processes are irreversible. They do not have a linear trajectory. The trajectory is zigzag. It's interesting to know that despite all these sanctions or tariffs on China, US-China trade has continued to grow.
Yeah.
And also with the concept of decoupling, they were terms introduced and practices introduced that were called reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring. And you have alluded to that indirectly about India. Reshoring meant that US capital will withdraw from China and establish factories elsewhere. Where that elsewhere could be, maybe on the mainland US. When you talk about friendshoring, it was friendly countries in Asia like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand for that matter, India for that matter. And nearshoring meant, let's say, in countries next to United States like Mexico and Canada. And that process also started. Expectations from people based in India was that India would be a major beneficiary. If US was disinvesting its capital from China and reinvesting this capital in other countries, logically, India as a democracy stands a chance. That didn't happen. Why that didn't happen? India had portrayed herself as a alternative to China, as a democratic alternative, but there are problems, and these are institutional, internal problems. What happened that Vietnam, Malaysia, and some other Southeast Asian countries became the major beneficiary. So what you saw was as the de-risking from China started and relocation of manufacturing concerns from China to other countries, mainly Vietnam and Malaysia, these countries actually got more integrated with Chinese economy. In other words, they become part of the Chinese supply chain mechanism. And what in fact happened that products made in China were relabeled as products made in Vietnam or products made in Malaysia, with some just tinkering, the packaging maybe in these countries. So Chinese are very clever and cunning people. They just co-opted these countries in Asia into their own supply chains. So ultimate beneficiary is who? It is still China. Now, hopes in India that India will become the alternative, they were roadblocks. India, despite all the advances since 2014, talk about single window clearance, improvement in infrastructure is still not there. Our processes are very complex. It's very difficult to, acquire land for factories or industrial concerns. There are, differences from state to state. The democracy is very noisy. There are, multiple windows of clearance, and there are vested interests that are actually inimical to the national interests. And these vested interests are always working. So anything that India tries to excel in, these vested interests put a roadblock. You might have seen that in a Foxconn factory in Bengaluru.
Yeah.
There was an industrial action, a strike, and then I think there was a fire or sabotage kind of done. Now, Foxconn factory was India's, production of advanced computer chips, so that India could actually not rely either on China or on Taiwan or become a global player. So examples like these are there. During COVID time, India was ramping up domestic vaccine production, and in Serum Institute of India production site, there was an unexplained fire causing a damage worth 1,000 crores. Nobody has been able to explain who caused that fire when India was, or an Indian private company was trying to manufacture vaccines in India during COVID time. Was it done to sabotage India's chances of becoming, a major COVID vaccine manufacturer earlier than China or to Western multinationals? And similarly, there was a cacophony of demands that India should import foreign manufactured vaccines from J&J and Moderna and Pfizer, and not focus on Indian vaccine efforts because they are not tested or inferior in technology. And people were demanding that, India purchase for $30 a shot vaccine from these Western manufacturers.
Yeah,
So the problem lies in India, where players that are inimical to national interest tend to sabotage any effort by India to take a leading role, specifically when it comes vis-a-vis China. And in that process, there are leftist organizations, there are trade unions who possibly get some economic benefits from China or become mouthpieces of China. So we have seen it time and again, whether that was shutting down of copper sterlite factory in Tamil Nadu, or uh, establishing new units
mm,
uh, of nuclear reactors in Tamil Nadu. We have seen the same thing over a period of time. So sadly speaking, because of these internal deficiencies and internal sabotage, India has not been able to capitalize on this US China trade conflict, which has been going on since 2017. It's been almost 7, 8 years this recent trade conflict has started. In India, people, you know, talk in a totally unrestrained manner that, oh, de-dollarization is happening. I mean, you have to be very, very critically evaluating this concept of de-dollarization.
right,
Do you want China to become the international reserve currency? You know, from
yeah,
Indian perspective, you don't want China to take over the place of United States. And as long as United States is the major superpower, there's nobody who will be able to replace dollar from yuan or renminbi, or for the by that matter any other currency. There was a talk about BRICS currency. Luckily, India dissociated with the concept of BRICS currency, because BRICS currency would mean, again, yuanization of the international trade system. From India's perspective, you have to work in a low-key manner. You have to make sure that there is regional trade conducted using local currencies so that our cost of trade does not increase. That's how we bypass the dollar. And in fact, at this point in time, more than 22 countries have started to do trade locally in local currencies uh, using Indian interfaces like UPI or RuPay.
yeah,
So we are developing mechanisms, but we should not be very gung-ho that we stand for de-dollarization or US economy will collapse the next day. Neither US economy is going to collapse, nor Chinese economy is going to collapse. People have been saying the same thing. Yes, there are headwinds in Chinese economy, but they still continue to export $1 trillion of manufactured goods to the rest of the world. Yes, our export share is increasing, but it is not commensurate with the expectations, with the hopes. And I think that is where we need to work on internal reforms. I hope I made my answer explicit.
yeah, right, sir. So, how has the India's diplomatic strategy evolved due to US-China trade war, especially in balancing relations with both the US and China while maintaining a strategic autonomy?
Well, India has been doing that. India was the first one to ban the TikTok.
Yeah.
US is still going through contortions and uh, domestic political and legal gymnastics to ban TikTok. Uh, so India has balanced her national interests. There is no gain accrued to India to having less than friendly relations with United States or having at least trade relations with China, because China is this point in time is second largest trading partner with India,
Okay.
and it is in your region. You have to be very cautious. You have to find alternative supply chains. China controls 69% of rare earth trade internationally. So you cannot call quits because there will be consequences. So you have to work slowly, build up your own capabilities and capacities, whether that is rare earth, whether that is domestic manufacturing, whether that is APIs for pharmaceutical production. You have to take decisive actions without overtly targeting these two major powers. In case of US, a superpower, and in case of it, China, a rising hegemon. While maintaining your strategic autonomy or strategic independence, you don't have to kowtow to each one's interests, but make sure that India's geopolitical, strategic, and geo-economic interests are safely, securely guarded, and country continues to prosper and grow. I am very happy to say that India has taken this pathway of independence from both these countries, but one would wish that domestic reform in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat or domestic
Yeah.
manufacturing is done at a faster pace. I mean, there was a time that even toys were being imported from China. Now India is exporting toys. India has, you know, started to ramp up defense production. So it cannot be done. You have to give it national priority to turn India into a manufacturing giant. That's possible. It's not that it's not possible, but our system, the democracy is so noisy. We waste almost 3% of our GDP on conducting numerous elections all the time. Every 3 months there is election in some state somewhere. China does not have that problem. If we can just have, elections everywhere once in 5 years, the government comes to halt. The election commission puts restrictions, code of conduct. Even central government is not able to take major decisions. Oh, you cannot declare the budget because there's elections in Delhi. I mean, this kind of thing is anti-growth. Having said that, domestic players love it because this is a dysfunctional system. If the system is reformed, the holy cows that have been exploiting the system and draining the system from within, draining the resources on personal uh, benefit and enrichment, they will be affected. So they don't allow reform of the system. In other words, what India needs is a central, strong, very strong central government that is able to take decisions without being cowed down. And I'll give you the example of three farm laws.
Yeah.
The system conspired, all the parties in the system, to force the central government to withdraw those three farm laws that would have revolved sector. I need not say who were the players. Even Supreme Court got involved,
Yeah.
and the ultimate aim was gaining brownie points against the central government. You had whole national capital region held to ransom. in these sit-ins in which they created quasi-permanent structures. The money was flowing from abroad to international elements. It's not, you cannot blackmail and hijack the economy of the nation because of your perceived injustices or your sense of entitlement that you will continue to dump pesticides and chemicals riddled farm product on the population of India and demand top dollar from the government of India. Does not happen anywhere else.
Yes, sir.
Yes, agriculture is important, but most of the people who were controlling this were foreign agents along with the middlemen, what in Hindi is called dalals. They did not want free trade. They did not want the farmer to get, the small farmer to get, price in a competitive market. So we have in India domestic problems which prevent India's rise internationally, globally. Our aspirations are not fulfilled because of these issues. Until these structural problems are sorted out internally, I'm afraid India may not be the beneficiary of the conflict between China and US economically.
Right, sir. So moving to the next question, as the US promotes India as a counterbalance to China in the Indo-Pacific region, what are the long-term implications for India's defense and trade alliances, including partnerships like Quad and IPEF?
Look, US has its own interests. When you are dealing with US, you have to be very, very cautious. US has a mentality that you are either with us or against us. So there is no in between. There are no shades of gray. And it is said, allegedly by Pakistanis, that US used them and threw them away like a condom. And that actually holds true for US attitude for any of its quote unquote allies. When there is a need, they will say all the nice, sweet things. Money will start flowing. When the utility to US strategic interest goes away, they will throw you under the bus. That has happened with multiple countries. So there is a danger of getting too much aligned with the United States, especially militarily. Economically, it's okay, but militarily, you cannot allow United States to fire on China using India's shoulder.
Right.
India has to be in the same geography, whether we like it or not. Because of occupation of Tibet, China has come next door to us.
Mm.
We have two armies standing eyeball to eyeball. There have been conflicts there. And in all this, has US ever said anything overtly in India's favor? Decisively. I have not seen that. Yes, US would like to use India in the Indo-Pacific theater. They also have their long-term goals, which may be considered somewhat sinister. They want bases in India. They want bases in Andaman and Nicobar. India has a policy not to give any Indian territory as a military base to any country. And what happened recently in Bangladesh, an Islamist coup, military-sponsored Islamist coup. In fact, the deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself said that white men came from US and demanded a US base in St. Martin's Island with the promise that I'll be allowed to remain Prime Minister for the fourth time if that happens. So you have the baggage of US and you have to be wary of that. I have no qualms about saying that India's interests are promoted economically in alliance with US. US is our top trading partner, and the trade is in favor of India. So you have to continue to work with US, engage US uh, economically, geo-economically, continue to have good trade relations, good people-to-people relations. But when it comes to defense relationship, right now it is buyer and seller relationship. They have difficulty even transferring technology. They have delayed actually transfer of GE 404 engines.
Yeah.
We are not even talking about 414 GE engines that is having impact on India's Tejas Mark II production. They want to sell you F-16s, which are like 40 years old aircraft, obsolete at this point in time. Why should India, agree to purchase those when they will not sell you F-35s? So there are a lot of implications there. Entering into any kind of military or defense alliance with United States. You can have a partnership, but you can never, and you should never, be a US ally. That is my advice to India. So continue to work in Quad without actually militarizing the Quad, without giving bases to United States. Meanwhile, ramp up your domestic production,
Yeah.
ramp up your, local domestic military industrial complex using public private partnership model. There's no reason to buy everything for the armed forces from abroad.
But we are moving in that direction with the
We are
new.
moving in that direction, albeit slowly. I want it to be done at a faster pace. When you have capability, you can double the production by having 2 shifts of workers. It's very easy. You have a production facility, just employ 2 shifts of workers or 3 shifts of workers, 8 hours each. Have round the clock production going on in our defense manufacturing units. You will be providing jobs to multiple jobless individuals,
Right.
and you will be ramping up the turnover. There's no sacrosanct about, factories opening at 9 a.m. and work finishing at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Why, why can't you have 3 shifts of production?
Yes. And companies are doing this. There are many factories. They do production around the clock.
Yeah, you have to do round the clock production, especially in the defense manufacturing units, because that is where the delay lies.
Yes. So with this, I'm moving to my last question. With the US imposing restrictions on Chinese technology and trade, what role can India play in global tech leadership? And how should it reform its trade policy to benefit from the evolving geopolitical landscape?
US has problems with China because China is the aspiring and rising hegemon that overtly, explicitly wants to displace US as the numero uno or the number one superpower. Luckily, India does not have those pretensions. India does not want to be to the pretender to the world throne in
Hmm.
geopolitics. India has taken a middle course that yes, we want to continue to rise geopolitically and strategically, but we are not in the business of becoming the major superpower. India said, okay, we'll be the Vishwamitra, Vishwaguru. Even that is a little bit hyperbole when we are not able to take care of our own issues. So again, India does not pose a threat to US strategic interests at this point in time. And that is good because US starts targeting any country militarily, economically, diplomatically, if it perceives threat from that country. And their response is vicious. They want to break that country apart. You've already seen what happened to Soviet Union, what they are trying to do with the Russian Federation, what happened to the former Yugoslavia, etc., etc. So there's no point getting into a conflict with the United States at this point in time because you are the weaker party. But avoidance of conflict does not mean capitulation to US demands, and it'll require savvy on part of Indian diplomacy to continue to work towards technology transfer while building up your own technological base. There was a talk of building India into a knowledge economy. Why it is that Indians excel only when they go abroad, when they go to the West. And it is still true. We may say whatever, but still, middle class Indians aspire to go to US, to UK, to Europe. That trend has not, stopped or has not been slow. The hope that some of the people who have gone abroad will come back again is not fulfilled to the extent one was thinking about. And again, we come back to our domestic shortcomings. Yes, there are some people, that have come back. New startups are being established in India. New unicorns are being established in India. So that's a good trend. We need to continue to build up our own technological base. Ultimately, nobody is going to give you technology.
Yeah.
China was very smart that they extracted transfer of technology because US was willing to be exploited. When US liberalized relationship with China during the Cold War, their explicit aim was to defeat Soviet Union, and in that process they were willing to do anything to appease China. So they allowed China to have the technology transfer for every industry US capitalists wanted to establish in China. And that was used to establish rival Chinese domestic manufacturers. That was the system. For everything, the technology transfer was done. Now US is getting smarter because they have created a Frankenstein's monster. In Indian terminology, they have created a Bhasmasur. So they are putting restrictions, and rightly so.
Yeah.
But they have been very slow in transferring technology to India. And I think we have not been aggressive in deal making with this transactional superpower. So learn the art of deal making and get whatever technology you can get, but don't rely only on Western technology. You have to be Atmanirbhar,
Yes.
in developing your indigenous technologies in whatever sphere. And there should not be any sphere that should be left untouched. You cannot say this is the area we'll work on and that we'll import from UK or US or from the European Union. You need to work on each and every single aspect of technology so that you're not held to ransom by these parties in case there's a conflict.
So thank you so much, sir. That was all the question I had on this topic for you. So thank you, friends. Thank you for being with us. And thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, for sharing your deep insights into such multifaceted issues. From economic strategy to diplomatic balances, this discussion has illuminated how the US-China trade war is reshaping India's path on global stage. And thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to the Global Focus. Stay informed, stay curious, and join us next time as we unravel more global stories that matter. Until then, take care and keep exploring.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha. for this session and repeated invitation to Global Focus platform. I am very pleased to be here.